Hi, my name is Hanson Versick, and this is my video snapshot. I'm going to talk about Captain America Boxed In by Jim Valletta, and I'm also going to be talking about The Malpractice Suite by Art Spiegelman. One that had the biggest impact on me was The Malpractice Suite by Art Spiegelman. I really liked the way that he depicted different point of views, and he kind of used the different parts of the comic overlapping in a way that was just I thought was really interesting. I've never seen like a comic kind of do the same kind of thing, and it was really interesting to kind of see how he used like a frame within a frame to kind of tell the story and expand the story. It's always something I'm looking for in a filmmaker, or when I'm making films, is I'm looking for how to uniquely tell a story within, that box, that I'm given. And he definitely uses that space really interestingly. I think it's very interesting compared to the other piece that I'm comparing it to, Captain America Boxed In, because it's totally different. Instead of, utilizing all the space, it kind of makes everything very thick and very bold, and it kind of makes everything in the piece stand out less, rather than bring attention to different elements. I think the artistic style is really interesting, and I think it pops and caught my attention almost immediately. The thickness of the panels and the depiction of the characters, you can't follow the story traditionally. You have to, look more into it. And because the text boxes are filled in, you don't kind of even know what the story is. I think emotionally, Captain America Boxed In kind of gave me this, like, disconnected feeling. Like, I felt like I was an outsider looking in. I think that's very different than Art Spiegelman's The Malpractice Suite, because in that piece I felt like I was in everybody's point of view, rather than an outsider looking in. And he had an amazing way of putting you, inside each of the characters, and kind of having this, perspective that was really interesting. While I think that Captain America Boxed In kind of made you feel distant from the piece. It kind of made you feel like you had to analyze it, you had to read into it, like it was like more of an art than a comic. And comic can be art, and I think all of the comics there are very artistic. However, I think that Art Spiegelman's piece, and I think they're both very expressive pieces. I think they're both expressive in very different ways. I think that Art Spiegelman's piece has more of this, like, narrative feel. Like, you really feel like you're watching a story. It's experimental in its build, but you feel like you're in all of these different perspectives. You feel like you're in a story. You feel like you're part of something. While Captain America Boxed In kind of gives you this distant feeling. Kind of gives you this, I would say, more design-heavy, kind of concept-driven piece. Both pieces bring up really interesting questions on what makes a piece underground, what makes a comic underground, what makes, this art form not in the mainstream. I think because in both pieces, it's more expressive than it is feeding you information. The average comic is going to give you something that's very palatable, just like the average, superhero movie is going to give you something that's very palatable. Action's so universal. That's why, action films do so well overseas, because they don't need to have amazing translations or need to have actors from the native areas. The action is something that everybody kind of craves and loves. I think that's why these pieces are more underground, is because they're more expressive, they're more unique, they're more artistic in that way, that they're messing around with the traditional way of telling a narrative, and they're more complex than that. In my own personal film experience, it's the same kind of way. I try to make pieces that are more expressive than they are, you know, action-packed or more like feeding you information. It's actually something I struggle a lot with making documentary, because I'm a documentary filmmaker. And when I approach a documentary, I often am tempted to do, you know, a traditional approach where you sit a person down and you talk and they talk to you and they're talking at you. But rather, I take a different approach. I go for more observational tone, or I let the person kind of narrate their own life in their own spaces. I think in a lot of ways that's very similar to both of the pieces. You know, an outsider looking in, like Captain America Boxed In, or more of the character telling their own stories in their own perspective in their own world, might be more of our Spiegelman's piece.